Welcome to English in Advance. I'm your host, Jessica, and I am so happy you've decided to join me today. If your goal is to truly elevate your English listening and speaking skills, you have found the perfect place. Here on our channel, we are dedicated to bringing you new content every single day, designed to help you learn English in a way that feels simple, natural, and most importantly, effective. Today's episode is about a topic that I know is on the minds of so many of you. It's about how to start speaking English with confidence. I want you to think for a moment. Do you ever feel a knot in your stomach when you need to speak English? Do you find yourself rehearsing sentences in your head over and over again, worried about making a mistake or not being able to find the right words? Maybe you know the grammar rules and you have a good vocabulary, but when it's time to actually speak, you freeze. If any of that sounds familiar, please know this. You are not alone. This is one of the most common challenges that English learners all around the world face. But I have good news for you. It's a challenge you can absolutely overcome. In this episode, we are going to focus on pushing past that fear and learning how to start simple, real-life conversations in English with a feeling of confidence. I'm going to share some stories and very practical examples that will show you exactly how to speak more comfortably and naturally. And as you listen today, you won't just be improving your listening skills, you'll also be gaining the tools you need to become a better writer and a more confident speaker. So, let's begin with a simple question for you to think about. What is the main reason you feel nervous when you have to speak English? Is it a deep fear of making a mistake in front of others? Is it a feeling that your English just isn't good enough yet? Or perhaps you just don't know how to begin a conversation. Take a moment and just be honest with yourself about that feeling. Understanding the root of your fear is the first step toward conquering it. Now let me share a quick story with you. My friend, Leo, moved to the United States last year for a new job. When he first arrived in Chicago, he felt incredibly shy about speaking English. Back in his home country, he had studied English in books and in classrooms. He knew a lot of grammar rules and could read articles without much trouble. But speaking in real life, that was a completely different world. He was terrified that people wouldn't understand his accent or that he would say something embarrassing. One afternoon, he went to a local coffee shop. The smell of coffee was wonderful, and the place was busy with people chatting. He wanted to order a simple cup of tea, but as he stood in line, his heart started to beat faster. He kept repeating the words in his head. I want tea. Can I have tea? But when he got to the counter, the words got stuck in his throat. He felt so nervous that he just pointed at the picture of a teacup on the menu instead of speaking a single word. He left the shop feeling frustrated and a little bit ashamed. Later that evening, sitting in his apartment, Leo had an important realization. He understood that if he truly wanted to improve his English and feel at home in his new city, he had to start speaking. Even if he made mistakes, he decided that silence was a bigger failure than saying a sentence imperfectly. So, the very next day, he walked back to that same coffee shop. He stood in line, his hands feeling a little sweaty, but this time, he was determined. When he reached the counter, he took a slow, deep breath and said, clearly and politely, "Hi, I'd like a cup of tea, please." It was such a simple sentence, just a few words. But for Leo, it felt like climbing a mountain. The cashier smiled warmly and replied, "Of course. What size would you like?" And just like that, they had a small, successful conversation. Leo walked out of that coffee shop with his tea, feeling a sense of pride he hadn't felt before. That one small success gave him the seed of confidence he needed to keep trying, to keep speaking English every single day. The lesson from Leo's story is powerful. Start simple. You don't need to begin with long, complicated sentences that use advanced vocabulary. In fact, that's often a recipe for feeling overwhelmed. Instead, focus on short, clear phrases that get your message across. For example, when you meet someone for the first time in a professional setting or a social gathering, you can simply smile and say, "Hi, my name is your name. It's really nice to meet you." Or when you're out shopping and want to know the price of something, a simple question like, "How much is this?" is all you need. Another fantastic tip is to practice common questions and their answers. Think about the small talk that happens every day. Let's imagine a conversation between Leo and his neighbor, a friendly older gentleman named Mr. Peterson. Leo might see him outside one morning and say, "Hi, good morning. How are you today?" Mr. Peterson would likely smile and reply, "Good morning, Leo. I'm doing well, thank you. And how about you?" Leo could then say, "I'm good, thanks. By the way, I saw your garden yesterday. It looks absolutely amazing." Mr. Peterson's face would light up. "Oh, thank you so much. My wife and I love gardening. Do you enjoy plants?" And Leo could continue, "Yes, I do. I don't know much about gardening, but I would love to learn someday." Do you see how simple and natural that conversation is? There was no perfect grammar or fancy vocabulary required. The key was being friendly, showing genuine interest, and using simple, everyday language. Communication is about connection, not perfection. Another way to build your confidence before you even leave your house is to prepare. Think about the common situations you find yourself in where you might need to speak English. This could be at the grocery store, at your workplace, or when meeting your children's teachers. Take a few minutes to practice what you might say in those situations. For example, if you know you have a doctor's appointment coming up, you can prepare a few key sentences in advance. You could practice saying, "I have an appointment at 10 a.m. with Dr. Miller." Or, if you're not feeling well, "I've been feeling a little sick for the past few days." I will be sharing many more tips and stories with you in just a moment. But first, I want you to take a second to think, what is one simple English sentence that you can use today? It doesn't have to be anything dramatic. Maybe you can greet a coworker in English, or ask a question at a store, or simply say thank you to the bus driver. Start small and build from there. Another great way to become more confident in speaking English is to find opportunities to practice with people you already know and feel comfortable with. You can start with family members, close friends, or even supportive coworkers who speak English. You don't have to wait for some perfect formal moment to practice. You can just use simple opportunities that pop up in your day-to-day life. For example, my friend Maria started learning English seriously last year. At the beginning, she was extremely shy. She didn't want to speak at all because she was so afraid of making mistakes and sounding silly. But then, she decided to make one small change in her daily routine. She decided to speak English with her husband at home for just a few minutes every day. It wasn't a formal lesson. They would just talk about simple things, like what they wanted to eat for dinner that night, or their plans for the upcoming weekend. One evening, Maria's husband asked her, What do you feel like eating tonight? And Maria, instead of answering in her native language, paused for a second and then said in English, I feel like having some chicken and rice. It was a small conversation, just one sentence. But the more they practiced together like this, the more comfortable and natural she became. After a few weeks of these mini conversations, she noticed a real difference. She could speak a little faster, and she was making fewer mistakes. This just goes to show how incredibly important it is to practice speaking every single day, even if it's only for a few minutes. You don't need to have long, deep conversations to improve. Short and simple interactions work just as well. The real key is consistency. The more you speak, the more your brain gets used to forming sentences in English, and the more natural it begins to feel. Another thing that helps tremendously is to let go of the fear of making mistakes. So many learners worry far too much about saying everything perfectly. They get stuck in their heads trying to remember every single grammar rule. But the honest truth is, mistakes are a normal and necessary part of learning. Think about how small children learn to speak their first language. They make countless mistakes. They say words incorrectly, they mix up grammar, but they keep speaking. And because they keep trying and don't worry about being perfect, they eventually improve and become fluent. Let me tell you about one of my own experiences. When I was first learning another language, I made so many mistakes. I remember one time I went to a small store because I wanted to buy some bread. But instead of saying the correct word for bread, I accidentally used a word that sounded similar but meant something completely different. The shopkeeper gave me a very confused look, and then he started to laugh. But it was a kind laugh, not a mean one. He gently corrected me and then helped me find the bread I needed. We both had a good laugh about it, and I realized in that moment that it was okay to make mistakes. People are usually very kind and patient when they see that you are making an effort to learn. So please, don't let the fear of mistakes stop you from speaking. Every single mistake is a valuable chance to learn and get better. Also, remember to listen carefully when other people are speaking English. Listening is a huge part of becoming a confident speaker. It helps you learn the correct pronunciation, the natural rhythm and intonation of the language, and the common expressions that people use in everyday life. When you're listening, try to actively repeat some of what you hear out loud. For example, if you hear a colleague at work say, "How's your day going?" You can practice repeating that same question to yourself a few times later. This simple exercise helps you get used to the sound and feel of the language. Now, what if you don't have people around you to practice with? Don't worry, you can also practice by talking to yourself. I know it might feel a little strange at first, but it is a fantastic way to build your speaking skills and your confidence. You can describe what you're doing in English as you do it. For example, I'm making breakfast now. I'm getting ready for work. Or, I'm going for a walk in the park. The more you speak out loud, even to an empty room, the more confident and comfortable you will become with the words. We'll continue with more tips and examples in just a moment, so please stay with me. But first, think about this. What is one simple sentence you can say in English today? Maybe you can greet someone you see, ask a simple question, or just describe what you're doing right now. Start with that one sentence. Another powerful way to build real confidence in speaking English is to intentionally put yourself in real-life situations where you have no other choice but to speak. I know this might sound a little scary at first, but the more you do it, the easier and less intimidating it becomes. The key is to start small and then gradually push yourself a little bit further out of your comfort zone each time. Let me share a story about my friend Ben. Ben moved to Canada for work, but he wasn't very confident in his English speaking abilities. He could understand the language quite well when he was reading an article or listening to a podcast, but when it came to actually speaking, he would hesitate. He would worry constantly about his grammar and would sometimes avoid conversations altogether, especially with native speakers. He told me that he always felt a wave of nervousness before speaking, afraid that people wouldn't understand him or that he would say something completely wrong. One day, Ben's company sent him to an important meeting where he had to introduce himself in English to a new team. He was incredibly anxious, but he knew he couldn't avoid it. So, just before it was his turn to speak, he took a slow, deep breath, and when the time came, he said, "Hello, everyone. My name is Ben. I work in the marketing department, and I am very happy to be here today." It was a simple, straightforward introduction, but for Ben, it was a massive step. After the meeting, he felt a huge sense of relief, but he also realized something very important. Most of the people in that room didn't care if his English wasn't perfect. They were friendly, they listened, and they just wanted to understand who he was. After that day, Ben started to challenge himself to speak more often. He made a new rule for himself. Every single day, he had to start at least one conversation in English. Sometimes it was just a small, brief interaction, like asking a coworker how their weekend was, ordering food at a restaurant, or making small talk with a cashier at the grocery store. Other times, he pushed himself to try longer conversations, like discussing a project at work or chatting with a neighbor about the weather. At first, it was still difficult. He still made mistakes, of course. But he started to notice that most people were incredibly kind and patient. Over time, his confidence grew steadily, and speaking English started to feel easier and more natural for him. Now, Ben can communicate his ideas clearly without feeling nervous, and he doesn't worry so much about making mistakes anymore. His experience teaches us a truly valuable lesson. The absolute best way to improve your speaking confidence is to practice in real-life situations. If you constantly avoid speaking, you will never improve. But if you take small, consistent steps every single day, you will get better, just like Ben did. Now let's talk about some very practical strategies that you can start using today to speak English with more confidence. First, use simple and clear sentences. You do not need to use difficult vocabulary or long, complex sentences to sound fluent. In fact, many native English speakers use short and simple sentences in their daily conversations. For example, instead of saying something formal and complicated like, "I would like to inquire about the availability of this product," you can just say, "Do you have this?" or "Is this available?" Both of those sentences mean exactly the same thing, but the second one is much simpler and easier to say when you're feeling nervous. Second, prepare common phrases for everyday situations. Think about the kinds of conversations you have most often in your daily life and prepare a few key sentences that you can use in those situations. For example, at a store, you might practice, "Excuse me, where can I find the bread?" At a restaurant, "I would like some chicken and rice, please." At work, "Can you explain this to me?" Or, "Let's talk about the project." When meeting new people, "Hi, my name is your name. It's very nice to meet you." If you practice these sentences at home, they will start to feel natural to you. Then, when the time comes to actually use them in a real conversation, you won't have to think so much about what to say. The words will be ready for you. Another incredibly useful strategy is to repeat phrases that you hear in conversations. If you're at work and you hear someone say, "How's your day going?" you can repeat that phrase in your head a few times and then try saying it yourself later on. Repeating common phrases like this helps you feel more comfortable and confident using them. Let's take a quick example. Imagine you are at work and your coworker, Sarah, starts a conversation. Sarah, "Hey, how's your day going?" You, "It's going well, thanks. How about you?" Sarah, "Pretty good, just a bit busy with this project." You, "Yeah, I understand. Work has been busy for me too." That is a perfect example of a simple, everyday conversation. It's exactly the kind of English you will use in real life. You don't need complicated vocabulary to communicate effectively. The goal is to speak naturally and comfortably. One more thing that helps immensely is to start thinking in English. Many English learners try to think of what they want to say in their native language first, and then translate everything in their heads before they speak. This process can slow you down and make you feel more anxious. Instead of translating, try to think directly in English. For example, if you are walking outside and you see the sun shining, instead of thinking about it in your native language and then searching for the English words, just think in your mind. The sun is shining. If you are feeling hungry, think, "I want to eat something." The more you practice thinking directly in English, the faster, more fluent, and more confident you will become. And if you ever feel stuck in a conversation because you can't remember a specific word, please don't panic. There is always a way to explain things using simple words. For example, if you forget the word refrigerator, you could describe it by saying, "The big cold box in the kitchen where you keep food." Native speakers do this all the time when they forget words. The important thing is to keep the conversation going and not let small difficulties stop you from speaking. I have another story that really shows how confidence in speaking English grows with consistent practice. My neighbor, Mr. Chen, moved to the United States from China about 5 years ago. At first, he didn't speak much English at all. He would usually just say hello to people and would actively avoid long conversations. But he had a strong desire to improve, so he made a habit of talking to his neighbors whenever he saw them outside. At first, it was just very short greetings, like, "Good morning," or "How are you?" But slowly, he started asking more questions. He would say things like, "How was your weekend?" or "What do you do for work?" His neighbors were very friendly, and they always took the time to answer his questions. Over time, Mr. Chen started to feel more and more comfortable speaking, and now he can have full, engaging conversations without any fear. The biggest lesson from his journey is that confidence truly comes from practice. If you wait until you feel 100% ready, you might never start speaking. But if you commit to taking small steps every single day, you will improve without even realizing it. Now, I want you to think about this for a moment. When was the last time you spoke English with someone? Was it at your job, in a store, or maybe with a friend? If you haven't spoken any English today, I want to challenge you to say something simple. Even if it's just one short sentence, it is a step forward. There is still so much more to discuss, so let's continue with more examples and practical tips. Stay with me. One of the most important things to remember when you're learning to speak English with confidence is that mistakes are simply part of the process. In fact, making mistakes is one of the very best ways to learn. When you make a mistake, you have an opportunity to realize what went wrong and how you can fix it for the next time. But I know that many people feel embarrassed when they make mistakes, and that fear of embarrassment can be so strong that it stops them from speaking at all. If that sounds like you, let me tell you this. People will not judge you for making mistakes. Most people will actually admire your effort and your courage to learn a new language. Let me tell you a story about my friend David. David moved to England with his wife and 2 young children. He had studied English in school for many years, but when he arrived, he found it incredibly difficult to speak in real, everyday conversations. He knew the grammar rules and he had a decent vocabulary, but when it was time to speak, he would just freeze up. He was so afraid of saying the wrong thing or of not being understood. One day, David went to a local bakery to buy some bread for his family. He wanted to ask the baker, "Do you have any fresh bread?" But he got nervous and the words came out all mixed up. He said something like, "Have you bread fresh?" The baker behind the counter just smiled kindly and said, "Yes, we have plenty of fresh bread right here." In that moment, David realized that even though his sentence wasn't grammatically perfect, the baker still understood him completely. And that moment changed everything for him. He understood that communication is about being understood, not about being perfect. After that day, David made a decision. He decided he wouldn't let his fear of making mistakes stop him anymore. He started speaking more in every situation he could find, at the store, at work, and with his neighbors. And over time, his sentences became clearer, his confidence grew, and he stopped worrying so much about being perfect. The more he spoke, the better he got. This is a lesson I truly want you to remember. Don't wait until your English is perfect before you start speaking. Start speaking now, and your English will improve as you practice. You will make mistakes, and that is more than okay. Every single mistake is a step closer to fluency. Another powerful way to build your confidence is to practice speaking English at home, all by yourself. You might be wondering, how can I practice speaking if there's no one around to talk to? But there are actually many effective ways to do this. For example, you can describe what you are doing out loud. If you're in the kitchen cooking dinner, you can say to yourself, "Now I'm chopping the onions, I'm heating the oil in the pan, I'm adding the spices." If you're cleaning your house, you can say, "I'm sweeping the floor, I'm wiping the table, I'm organizing the books on the shelf." This simple habit helps you to think in English and become more comfortable with common everyday vocabulary. You can also practice by talking about your day. At the end of the day, take just a few minutes to speak out loud and describe what happened. You can say something like, "Today I went to work. I had a meeting with my boss. We talked about the new project. In the evening, I went for a walk with my wife. The weather was nice and we had a good conversation." If you want to take this practice a step further, you can record yourself speaking on your phone. Then listen back to the recording and pay attention to your pronunciation and your fluency. Don't be too critical of yourself. Remember, the goal is progress, not perfection. Over time, as you keep doing this, you'll start to notice improvements, and that will boost your confidence even more. Let's talk about one more thing that really helps with speaking confidence. Learning how to keep a conversation going even when you don't know what to say. Many people worry that they'll run out of things to talk about, or that they won't understand what the other person is asking them. But you don't need to know everything to have a good, successful conversation. Let's go even deeper into this idea of building confidence when speaking English, because I know this is something that so many learners struggle with. If you've ever felt nervous, shy, or afraid of making mistakes when speaking English, you are definitely not alone. But I promise you, there are real, simple ways to overcome that fear and start speaking with the confidence you desire. One of the first and most important things to remember is that confidence doesn't come from speaking perfectly. It comes from practice and consistency. Think about a small child who is learning to walk. They don't wait until they know how to walk perfectly before they even try. They take one wobbly step, they fall down, they get back up, and they keep going. And that is exactly what you need to do with speaking English. You take one step, you might make a mistake, but you keep going, and that is precisely how you improve. Let me tell you a story about my friend Michael. When Michael first started learning English, he knew a lot of vocabulary words and grammar rules from his textbooks. But when it came to actually speaking, he would freeze. He was so intensely afraid of saying the wrong thing that sometimes he wouldn't say anything at all. One day, he was at his son's school for a parent-teacher meeting. The teacher looked at him and asked a simple question. "How is your son doing with his homework at home?" Michael understood the question perfectly, but he got so nervous that he just managed to say, "Yes, homework is good." He felt embarrassed because he knew his answer didn't really make sense and wasn't a full sentence. But here's what happened next. The teacher just smiled kindly and said, "That's great to hear. Does he need any extra help with his reading?" Michael realized something incredibly important in that moment. Even though his answer wasn't perfect, the conversation kept going. The other person was patient and kind, and that's what you'll find most of the time. People are generally understanding and supportive when they see you're trying to learn their language. After that day, Michael decided to stop being so afraid of making mistakes. He started speaking more. At the grocery store, at his job, and even with his neighbors. And every single time he spoke, his confidence grew a little bit more. He realized that communication is not about being perfect. It's about being understood. And the more you practice, the easier that becomes. Now, let's talk about a really simple technique that can help you start speaking English right away. Thinking in English. As I mentioned before, a lot of learners translate everything from their native language to English in their head before they speak. That process takes a lot of time and mental energy. It also makes you more nervous because you're trying to remember the perfect translation for every single word. But when you start to practice thinking directly in English, you skip that translation step and you can start speaking much more naturally. Here's how you can practice this. Start with the simple things around you. When you're getting dressed in the morning, think to yourself, "I'm wearing a blue shirt and black pants today." When you're cooking breakfast, think, "I'm making eggs and toast. I need to get the butter from the fridge." When you're walking to work or taking the bus, think, "The weather is nice today. I see children playing in the park. You can also practice this by describing your day out loud, as we discussed. At the end of the day, take 5 minutes to just talk to yourself in English. You could say, "Today was a busy day. I had a meeting with my manager in the morning. We talked about a new project. In the afternoon, I finished some reports. In the evening, I went for a walk with my wife. It was a nice, relaxing evening." When you do this every day, you start getting much more comfortable forming sentences in English. And when it's time to speak to someone else, the words will come to you more easily. Another powerful way to build your confidence is by using simple, polite phrases that help keep conversations going. A lot of learners worry that if they don't understand everything, the conversation will stop. But you don't need to understand every single word to keep a conversation going. You just need a few helpful phrases in your toolkit. Let's imagine you're talking to your neighbor, Mr. Khan. Mr. Khan, "Hi, how are you?" You, "I'm doing well, thank you. How about you?" Already you've started the conversation with confidence. Now, let's say Mr. Khan asks you something a little more complex, like, "Did you hear about the new park opening next week?" If you didn't quite understand him, you could say, "I'm sorry, could you say that again?" Or, "I didn't quite catch that. Could you repeat it, please?" And if you still don't understand, that's okay too. You can say, "I'm not sure I understand. Could you explain it a bit more?" These simple, polite phrases show the other person that you are engaged in the conversation and that you are trying your best. And that is what really matters. Now, let's talk about another technique that helps you sound more confident, using follow-up questions. Follow-up questions show that you're interested in the other person, and they help keep the conversation moving forward naturally. Let's imagine you're talking to a colleague named Emily. Emily, "I had a really busy weekend." You, "Oh, really? What did you do?" When Emily answers, you can ask another follow-up question. Emily, "We had some family over for dinner on Saturday." You, "That sounds nice. Do they live nearby?" Do you see how asking these simple questions keeps the conversation flowing? It takes the pressure off of you. You don't need to have perfect English. You just need to have curiosity and a few simple questions ready. One of the best ways to practice this is by role-playing common conversations. Imagine you're at a cafe ordering a coffee. Barista, "Hi, what can I get for you today?" You, "Hi, I'd like a cappuccino, please." Barista, "Sure. Would you like anything to eat with that?" You, "Yes, I'll have a croissant, please." You can even practice these conversations out loud when you're at home. The more you practice, the more comfortable and confident you will feel in real situations. I also want to share one more story with you. This one is about my cousin Ahmed. Ahmed got a new job where he had to speak English every single day. At first, he was really nervous because he didn't feel confident at all in his speaking skills. But instead of letting that fear stop him, he decided to practice every single day. He started small by just greeting his colleagues in the morning. "Good morning. How's your day going?" Then he started joining conversations during the lunch break, even if he only said a few sentences. Over time, his confidence grew and grew, and now he leads team meetings in English without any fear. Ahmed told me the secret to his success was this: I stopped worrying about being perfect, and I just focused on being clear and friendly. The more I practiced, the easier it became. And that is exactly what I want for you. Don't wait until your English is perfect. Start speaking today, even if it's just a little bit every day. The more you speak, the better and more confident you will become. Let's really take our time and go deeper into this, because speaking English with confidence is one of the most important skills you can build. And the truth is, it's not just about knowing grammar rules or having a big vocabulary. It's about how comfortable you feel using the language in real-life situations. I know that can be tough sometimes, but I promise you, if you stick with me and keep practicing, you will get there. So far, we've talked about how confidence comes from practice, how making mistakes is a natural part of learning, and how using simple, polite phrases can help keep conversations going. But I want to take it even further now. Let's really focus on some practical techniques and real-life examples that you can start using right away to sound more natural and confident when you're speaking English. One of the biggest things that stops people from speaking English is the fear of making mistakes, and I completely understand that. Nobody likes feeling embarrassed or not knowing the right words. But here's something really important to remember. Making mistakes is not a bad thing. In fact, it is one of the best ways to learn. Another thing that helps a lot is starting with simple conversations. You don't have to jump into long, complicated discussions right away. Begin with small, everyday conversations, like saying hello to your neighbors, asking simple questions at the store, or talking to your colleagues at work. For example, let's say you're at a grocery store and you want to ask where the apples are. You can keep it very simple. Excuse me, where can I find the apples? Store worker, they're in aisle 3. Thank you so much. That's a short, simple conversation, but it's real practice. And every time you have a conversation like this, no matter how small, you are building your confidence bit by bit. Now let's talk about something really important: preparation. One of the best ways to feel confident when you're speaking English is to prepare for the situations you know you are going to face. Think about the kinds of conversations you typically have in your daily life, at work, at the store, with your kids' teachers, or at the doctor's office. If you prepare some common phrases and questions for these situations, you will feel much more ready when the time comes. Let's take an example. Imagine you're going to a doctor's appointment. You can prepare some questions ahead of time, like, how long will I have to wait? Can you explain this prescription, please? What should I do to feel better? You can also prepare answers to questions the doctor might ask you. I've had this pain for 3 days. I feel very tired and dizzy. The medicine isn't helping. When you prepare like this, you take away a lot of the fear and nervousness because you already have a good idea of what to say. And the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. Another great way to build confidence is by practicing with a partner. If you have a friend, a family member, or a colleague who speaks English, ask them if they would be willing to help you practice. You can role-play different situations, like ordering food at a restaurant, making an appointment over the phone, or just having a casual conversation. For example, Hi, I'd like to book an appointment with Dr. Smith. Receptionist, your friend. Sure. When would you like to come in? Do you have any openings on Friday morning? Receptionist, let me check. Yes, we have 10 a.m. available. That works for me. Thank you. The more you practice conversations like this, the more comfortable you will feel when you have to have these conversations in real life. Let's also talk about using your body language and your tone of voice to sound more confident. Sometimes your body language can show nervousness, even if your words are correct. If you are looking down at the floor, avoiding eye contact, or speaking very quietly, people might think you are unsure of yourself, even if you are saying all the right things. So here's a tip. Stand or sit up straight. Make eye contact with the person you're talking to and smile when you greet people. When you speak, try to keep your voice clear and steady. You don't need to speak loudly, just loud enough to be heard clearly. I'll share another story with you. This one is about my cousin James. James had a job interview in English and he was really nervous. But before the interview, he practiced standing up straight in front of a mirror, making eye contact and speaking clearly. When the interview started, he greeted the interviewer with a big, confident smile and said, "Good morning. Thank you for meeting with me today." Right away, the interviewer saw his confidence, even though James was still feeling a little nervous on the inside. By the end of the interview, James felt great because he knew he had made a good impression, not just with his words, but with his confident attitude. And guess what? He got the job. Finally, I want to talk about one more thing that can really help. Building a daily habit of speaking English. The more you use English, the more comfortable you will become. Even if you don't have people to talk to every single day, you can still practice. Here are some ideas. Talk to yourself in English when you're cooking, cleaning, or driving. Describe your day out loud before you go to bed. Record yourself speaking and listen back to see how you can improve. Read a short article or story, and then summarize it out loud in your own words. When you make speaking English a part of your daily life, it starts to feel natural. And the more natural it feels, the more confident you will become. I hope you're starting to see that speaking English with confidence isn't about being perfect. It's about being brave enough to try. Every time you speak, you are getting better. Every mistake you make teaches you something new. And every small conversation helps you grow. All right, let's keep going and really dive deep into this, because building confidence when speaking English takes time, practice, and the right mindset. The more we explore this topic, the more tools you'll have to speak English naturally and comfortably in your everyday life. And remember, every single step you take brings you closer to fluency. So let's take this next step together. One of the most important things to remember when you're trying to speak English with confidence is that your mindset plays a huge role. If you believe you can improve and you stay positive, you will learn much faster. But if you keep telling yourself things like, "My English isn't good enough," or "I'm too scared to speak," it becomes much harder to grow. So the first step is to change how you think. Start telling yourself, "I am learning and I am getting better every day." And it's okay to make mistakes because that's how I improve. Let me tell you a story about my friend Daniel. When Daniel started learning English, he felt really shy. He knew some words and grammar, but every time he tried to speak, he froze. He was so afraid of saying something wrong that he would just stay quiet, even when he knew the answer to a question. But one day, something changed. Daniel met a neighbor, Mr. Johnson, who was very friendly. Mr. Johnson asked him, "How are you doing today?" And instead of staying quiet, Daniel took a deep breath and answered, "I'm good, thank you." "And you?" It was a simple response, but that small moment gave Daniel a huge boost of confidence. He realized that people weren't judging him for his mistakes. They were just happy that he was trying. From then on, Daniel started speaking more often. He made mistakes, of course, but every mistake taught him something new. And the more he spoke, the more comfortable he became. So if you feel nervous about speaking English, remember Daniel's story. Start small. Even a simple hello or how are you is progress. Every word you say brings you closer to confidence. Now, let's talk about something that really helps when you're learning to speak with confidence. Practicing with people you trust. If you have a friend, a coworker, or a family member who speaks English, ask them to practice with you. Tell them you want to improve, and they will probably be happy to help. When you practice with someone who is patient and supportive, you'll feel more comfortable trying new words and expressions. For example, my cousin Emily wanted to practice her English, so she started having short conversations with her husband every evening. They would talk about their day, what they ate for dinner, or their plans for the weekend, all in English. At first, it was a little difficult, and she made a lot of mistakes. But because she was speaking with someone she trusted, she didn't feel embarrassed. Instead, she learned from those mistakes and kept improving. If you don't have someone to practice with, don't worry. You can still build your speaking skills by talking to yourself. I know it might sound a little funny, but it really works. Try describing what you're doing as you go through your day. For example, I'm making breakfast. I'm frying some eggs and toasting some bread. I need to get some butter from the fridge. I'm cleaning the living room. I'm vacuuming the carpet and dusting the shelves. The more you speak English out loud, even when you're alone, the more natural it will start to feel. Another great technique is repeating real-life conversations that you hear. Imagine you're in a coffee shop and you hear someone say, "Excuse me, can you help me find the post office?" Pause for a moment and repeat that sentence out loud to yourself. Then, practice different ways to respond. Sure, it's just down the street on the left. I'm sorry, I'm not sure. You could ask someone at the cafe. By practicing both sides of the conversation, you'll feel more prepared when you face similar situations in real life. Now, let's talk again about preparation. Because one of the best ways to feel confident when speaking English is to be prepared for common situations. Think about the kinds of conversations you have every day. Maybe you go to the grocery store, visit the doctor, or call customer service. If you prepare for these situations in advance, you won't feel so nervous when they happen. Let's take an example. Imagine you're going to a bakery to buy some bread. Good morning. Do you have any fresh bread today? Cashier, yes, we just baked some this morning. Would you like white bread or whole wheat? I'll take a loaf of whole wheat, please. How much is it? Cashier, it's $3. Thank you so much. When you practice conversations like this before you actually need them, you'll feel much more prepared and confident when the time comes. And don't forget about your body language. The way you stand, look, and move can also help you sound more confident. Stand up straight, make eye contact, and smile when you greet people. When you speak, use a clear and steady voice. You don't need to speak loudly, just loud enough so the other person can hear you clearly. My friend Ahmed learned this when he had a job interview in English. He was really nervous, but he prepared by practicing his answers and working on his body language. During the interview, he sat up straight, made eye contact, and smiled. Even though his English wasn't perfect, his confident attitude made a great impression. And guess what? He got the job. So remember, Confidence isn't just about knowing the right words, it's also about how you carry yourself. When you combine clear speech with positive body language, people will see you as confident, even if you make a few mistakes. Another powerful way to build your speaking confidence is by listening to real conversations in English. The more you listen, the more familiar you'll become with how people use the language in everyday life. Pay attention to how they ask questions, how they respond, and the kinds of phrases they use. Then practice copying those phrases in your own conversations. For example, if you hear someone say, "That sounds great," or "I really appreciate it," try using those phrases yourself. The more you use natural expressions like these, the more confident you'll sound. And don't be afraid to ask questions if you don't understand something. In fact, asking questions is a great way to keep conversations going. Here are a few simple questions you can use in different situations. Could you say that again, please? What does that word mean? Can you explain that a little more? When you ask questions, you show that you're engaged and interested, and that helps you build stronger connections with the people you're speaking to. Finally, I want you to remember this. Speaking English with confidence is a journey. It takes time, patience, and a lot of practice. But every time you speak, even if it's just a few words, you are getting better. Every mistake you make is an opportunity to learn, and every conversation helps you grow. Let's keep building on this, because the more we explore ways to speak English with confidence, the better prepared you'll be to handle any situation that comes your way. Speaking English fluently and confidently isn't something that happens overnight, but with practice, persistence, and the right strategies, you can definitely get there. So let's dive deeper into the ways you can start speaking English with more confidence, using some easy-to-understand tips and real-life examples that can make a big difference. I want you to think about one thing before we continue. Imagine yourself in a situation where you need to speak English, but you're feeling nervous. Maybe it's a job interview or even just chatting with someone you don't know very well. Your first instinct might be to freeze up, but there's something very important to remember here. The person you're speaking with is not focused on how perfect your English is. They are interested in what you're saying and in having a conversation with you. This is something you can remind yourself of when you start feeling nervous. The pressure is often in our own minds. We think we need to be perfect, but in reality, people just want to understand us and connect with us. A really good way to overcome this pressure is to change your focus. Rather than thinking, "What if I make a mistake?" or "What if my English isn't perfect?" Try thinking, "How can I make sure the other person understands me?" Focus on the message you want to communicate and remind yourself that making mistakes is part of the learning process. Mistakes are natural, and they can actually help you become a better speaker. So when you speak English, focus on expressing your ideas clearly and don't be afraid to make those small mistakes along the way. Let me tell you a little story about my friend Sarah. Sarah started learning English a few years ago. At first, she felt very nervous and avoided speaking with native speakers because she was afraid of making mistakes. She was in a group at work where most people spoke English, but she would only listen and never join the conversation. But one day, her colleague, Mark, who was very friendly and understanding, invited her to have lunch together. Sarah was nervous, but she decided to give it a try. When they sat down, Sarah started by saying, "I'm sorry, my English is not perfect, but I want to practice." And guess what Mark said? "No problem at all. Let's just have a casual chat. I'm happy to help." That lunch turned out to be a big breakthrough for Sarah. She started talking more comfortably even though her English wasn't perfect. Mark didn't judge her for making mistakes. Instead, he encouraged her. Every time Sarah made a mistake, Mark gently corrected her, and after a few months, Sarah's confidence grew so much that she was participating in conversations all the time. So remember this: if you don't feel confident speaking, try to find someone who is understanding, like Sarah's colleague, Mark. People are usually very supportive when you're learning. If you tell them you want to practice, most people will be more than happy to help you improve. Just like with Sarah, speaking with someone patient and kind can make a huge difference. Now let's talk about how practicing real-life scenarios can help you build confidence. One of the best ways to practice is by imagining situations you might find yourself in during your daily life. Think about the types of conversations you might have, whether it's at a cafe, in a store, at a doctor's office, or even at work. The more familiar you are with the phrases and vocabulary used in these situations, the less nervous you'll feel when you have to speak. For example, if you often go to the grocery store, imagine yourself having a simple conversation with the cashier. "Cashier, good afternoon. How are you today?" "You, I'm doing well, thank you. How about you?" "Cashier, I'm good, thank you for asking." "Are you ready to check out?" "You, yes I am. How much is everything?" By practicing these types of conversations out loud, even when you're alone, you'll start to feel more comfortable. You won't need to think too much in the moment because you'll already be familiar with what to say. It's like building a mental toolkit for different situations. And remember, these conversations don't have to be complicated. The more simple and natural they are, the more comfortable you'll feel. Here's another story to illustrate this point. My friend Jake is an advanced English learner, but he still struggled to speak confidently in real-world situations. He would practice with his language partners, but whenever he was out in public, he felt nervous. One day, he decided to record himself practicing simple conversations. For example, he would record himself ordering food at a restaurant. At first, it felt strange to hear his own voice, but after a few weeks, Jake started to notice something. He didn't need to think so much about the phrases he was using. They became second nature to him. He also realized that he wasn't making the same mistakes anymore because he had practiced so much. This helped him feel more confident when he went out and spoke with people. By practicing with real-life scenarios, Jake prepared himself for any situation he might face in his day-to-day life. Another thing that can help you build confidence is learning how to manage the nervousness that naturally comes with speaking. It's totally normal to feel nervous. Everyone does, even native speakers. But there are ways to control those feelings so they don't take over. One technique I recommend is deep breathing. It might sound simple, but it can really help you calm your nerves. Before you speak, take a slow, deep breath in for a few seconds, hold it for a moment, and then breathe out slowly. Doing this a few times can help relax your body and clear your mind. When you're not feeling as anxious, you'll be able to focus more on the conversation and less on your nerves. When you start a conversation, try to remind yourself that the other person isn't focused on your mistakes. They're focused on what you're saying, and if you make a mistake, don't worry, just keep going. People appreciate the effort you're making to speak in their language. One of my colleagues, Maria, told me that the first time she went to an English-speaking country, she was so nervous. She was scared she wouldn't understand anyone and that she'd say something silly. But when she started speaking, she realized that people were more interested in her ideas than in her grammar, and that helped her relax. Another tip is to practice active listening. This means really paying attention to the words and phrases people use around you. The more you listen, the more familiar these phrases will become, and you'll be able to use them in your own conversations. Active listening also helps you understand how conversations flow naturally in English. For example, when you're listening to a conversation, try to notice how people ask follow-up questions. In English, we often ask things like, "What about you?" "Tell me more about that." "How did that make you feel?" By practicing these kinds of responses, you'll be able to engage in conversations more easily. You'll also sound more natural, which will make you feel more confident. So keep listening to English conversations in your daily life, whether it's through podcasts, videos, or even conversations you overhear while you're out. The more you listen, the more confident you'll be when it's your turn to speak. Let's also talk about how having a daily practice routine can help you build confidence over time. One thing I recommend is setting aside 10 to 15 minutes each day to speak English out loud. This might be difficult at first, but as you continue, it will become easier. Try to talk about simple things in your life. What did you do today? What are your plans for the weekend? What did you have for lunch? These short, simple conversations can help you gain the practice you need to feel more confident. Let's take my friend Peter as an example. Peter was nervous about speaking English in front of others, so he made it a habit to speak to himself in English every day. He would describe his morning routine, talk about his work, and even practice ordering food from his favorite restaurant. The more he spoke, the more comfortable he became. And when he finally started speaking with others, it felt much more natural to him. The key takeaway from Peter's story is that confidence comes with practice. By dedicating a little time every day to speaking English, you'll slowly build your speaking skills and reduce your nervousness. As we continue to work on your speaking confidence, remember that every time you speak English, even if you feel nervous or make mistakes, you are making progress. And that progress will add up over time, helping you feel more confident with each conversation. Keep practicing, and we'll keep exploring new ways to help you improve. Let's keep going, and I'm glad you're finding this helpful. The journey to speaking English with confidence is a process, but it's a process you can take step by step. In this part of the conversation, let's dig deeper into how to stay motivated and keep practicing when things feel difficult. Learning a language can sometimes feel overwhelming, but with the right mindset and strategy, you can keep building your confidence and fluency every day. Now, I want you to think about how you approach challenges in other areas of your life. Maybe there's something you've learned to do, like cooking, playing a sport, or even a new hobby. At the beginning, it probably felt hard, right? You might have made mistakes or felt unsure of yourself. But with practice, those things started to feel more natural. Speaking English is exactly the same way. The more you practice, the more confident you'll feel. Let's talk about something important here: consistency. Consistency is key when it comes to language learning. Just like with any skill, the more you practice, the better you get. It's not about practicing for hours every day, but it's about doing it regularly. Imagine if you tried to get better at basketball, but you only practiced once a week. You'd struggle. But if you practiced a little every day, even for 15 minutes, you'd improve much faster. I know this can be difficult because sometimes life gets busy. Maybe you work, have family responsibilities, or other commitments. But the key is to fit English practice into your routine, even if it's just a few minutes each day. You don't have to be perfect. The goal is to just keep moving forward. This could mean practicing with a friend, listening to English podcasts during your commute, or simply speaking to yourself in English about your day. Every time you practice, even in small ways, you're taking one step closer to sounding more confident in your speaking. Let's take a look at another example. My friend Emily was juggling a full-time job and family commitments, but she wanted to improve her English speaking skills. At first, she tried to practice for hours each day, but she soon realized it wasn't realistic with her schedule. So instead of overwhelming herself, she decided to focus on shorter, daily practice sessions. She set aside just 10 minutes every morning to practice speaking English out loud. During this time, she'd talk about what she was going to do that day or share her thoughts about what she had for breakfast. These short, daily practices helped her build her confidence without stressing herself out. As Emily's English became more natural, she felt more comfortable speaking with others. Her confidence grew because she wasn't putting pressure on herself to be perfect. She was simply practicing. So remember, practice doesn't need to be long, but it should be consistent. One thing I often tell my students is that progress in language learning is like planting a tree. In the beginning, you don't see a lot of growth, but if you keep watering it, even when it seems like nothing is happening, eventually you'll notice how big and strong that tree has grown. It's the same with your English skills. You may not see improvement right away, but trust me, it's happening. Every time you practice, your skills are growing, even if you can't see it immediately. Another key point to remember is that your mindset plays a huge role in building confidence. The way you think about yourself and your abilities affects how you speak. When you approach English with a positive attitude, you're more likely to make progress. Instead of thinking, I can't do this, try changing your mindset to, I am learning and I am getting better every day. If you focus on what you can do rather than what you can't, you'll start to notice your confidence growing. Let me tell you a story about my friend Mike. Mike always thought he wasn't good at English. He had studied the language for many years, but he still felt nervous every time he spoke. One day, he decided to change his mindset. He started reminding himself that it's okay to make mistakes and that making mistakes was part of learning. Instead of worrying about the things he couldn't do, he focused on the things he could. And guess what happened? His confidence grew so much that he started speaking up in meetings at work and even started teaching some of his colleagues English. Mike's story shows how important it is to believe in yourself. A positive mindset can really make a big difference. It can transform your approach to speaking English and help you feel more confident. Now let's dive into how you can make the most of your English practice by creating opportunities to speak. The more you practice speaking English in real-life situations, the better you'll become at managing nervousness and communicating clearly. So how can you create these opportunities? Well, here are a few simple ideas. First, look for language exchange partners. These are people who want to learn your native language, and in return, you can help them with their English. Language exchanges are a great way to practice because you're both focused on helping each other, so there's no pressure to be perfect. Whether you meet in person or chat online, it's a low-stress way to practice speaking and listening. Plus, you can learn a lot from your partner. You might even become friends. Another opportunity is speaking with colleagues or friends who speak English. You can arrange to have short conversations during lunch breaks or whenever you have free time. I know many people feel nervous about speaking at first, but once you make it a habit, it'll get easier. Start by chatting about everyday things like your weekend plans or the weather. As you continue practicing, you'll gain more confidence in your ability to have longer, more complex conversations. You could also try joining online groups or communities where English is spoken. There are tons of Facebook groups, forums, and even chat rooms where you can interact with English speakers. Participating in these groups can help you practice speaking and also get feedback from others. You'll also be able to see how native speakers express themselves, which will help you use more natural-sounding English in your own conversations. Speaking of online communities, let me tell you about a student of mine, Tom. Tom joined an online group for people learning English. At first, he was really nervous about speaking to people he didn't know, but after a few weeks, he started feeling more comfortable. He began participating in group chats and even spoke in live video calls. The more he spoke, the easier it became. His confidence grew so much that after 6 months, he was even helping others in the group by offering advice on their English. Tom's story shows how joining an online community can really make a difference in building your confidence. The key is to start small and then gradually increase the amount you speak. Remember, building confidence doesn't happen all at once. It takes time, and it requires consistent practice. But the more you practice speaking, the better you'll get. And with each conversation, whether it's with a colleague, a language partner, or an online group, you're strengthening your ability to speak English confidently. You're creating a positive feedback loop where practice leads to progress, and progress leads to more confidence. Here's another great tip. Use technology to your advantage. Nowadays, there are so many apps and tools available that can help you practice your English speaking skills. You can use apps like Duolingo, HelloTalk, or even find YouTube channels like this one to practice speaking and listening. There are also apps that allow you to record yourself speaking and listen back to improve your pronunciation and fluency. One of my students, Linda, started using an app where she could record her voice and listen to herself speak. At first, she didn't like hearing her voice, but she kept going. She focused on how she could improve her pronunciation and sentence structure. Over time, she began to sound more natural, and her confidence grew. Linda's story is a great example of how technology can help you practice and improve without needing to wait for someone else to help. To wrap this part up, confidence in speaking English comes from a mix of mindset, practice, and real-life opportunities. You can do this. The more you practice and challenge yourself to speak, the more confident you will become. Keep setting small goals, focus on improvement, and remember that mistakes are part of the process. Keep going and keep learning, and soon you'll see just how far you've come. I hope today's episode has given you the courage to take that first step, or the next step, in your English-speaking journey. The path to confidence is built one simple sentence at a time, one small conversation at a time. Remember to be patient and kind to yourself. You are learning, you are growing, and you are capable of amazing things. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe to our channel, English in Advance, and make sure you hit that bell notification so you never miss a new episode. We have new content coming out every single day to help you on your path to fluency. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Jessica, and I'll talk to you in the next one.